So I'm going to welcome everyone online, and I'm Ann Vogel. I'm the owner of Dragon Tail Books. So thank you all for coming. So I created this environmental series because it's just something near and dear to my heart, and I wanted to bring to the community some of our local issues. So Peter Kilde agreed to kick us off today about adapting to climate change. And so I have a new event coming February 1st, I think at 6 o'clock. So Arthur Neeland and Nicole Hayes from UW Stout's biology department are going to talk kind of about the state of the lake. So watch for that one, because I haven't put it out there yet. Just today we scheduled. So thank you so much, Peter. I'll take it away.
All right, well, good evening, everybody, and thanks for showing up for this on a cold night. You know, this is just a perfect week to be talking about the perils of things warming up, huh?
Ski trail is not open. So
okay, well. So very happy to have you here, and I'm talking a little bit about WestCAP, because that's the setting in which I do most of my work. I'm also about to break every rule that you've ever heard about for PowerPoints. I have 102 of them, and we're going to see them all. So you might strap yourself in if you know, because we're going to be moving pretty quick. That kind of stuff. But truth of the matter is, this is actually such a complex issue, and part of the problem we have addressing it is to get our head around the whole thing. So this is an attempt to take that 30,000-foot view and to have at least all the components in there. Given this, if you would be kind enough to maybe just hold on to questions if you have any until the end, so I can talk through it. And then I do have a little humorous treat at the end. It's kind of dark humor, but it's pretty good. All this should be, we can do it go after. So with that, we'll head it off here. So best of all possible futures, and just so you know, this little house is actually in Connersville, and it's one that WestCAP did a deep retrofit on 15 years ago. It's just about a net zero little house, cozy, non-presumptuous, and works well. So for those of you who don't know, and hardly anybody in this group doesn't, I'm from here, which is over there in Wisconsin. The colored area where that arrow goes are the 7 counties that are WestCAP service territory. For your global thinkers, I'm from here. And for the relocalizers, we got some riffraff drifting in here. Okay.
rabble rousing as usual.
These happen to all the people I love, so that makes it a little easier to, Indeed. We didn't miss much. You might recognize some of these.
Yeah, some park or something.
So this is actually a little farm where I live now with my daughter, and got another daughter planning to show up here before too long, and just happened to also show up here. And at this point, the main job of this farm is sequestering or offsetting carbon. That's what it does, and it's pretty good at it. So it's got a little solar panel, generates about 70% of the energy for the farm. We're bought into the community solar and Dumb Electric, pick up another 22% or so. So it's pretty self-sufficient that way. And then the farm really provides the electric energy we need. It provides the cooking and heating fuel. We cook and eat with wood. The regenerative agriculture, I don't want to get too far in the weeds here, but I've been convinced for years that, like any healthy ecosystem on the planet, it's a symbiotic relationship between plants and animals. As I joke with my Buddhist friends here, I have a beef with the Buddha on this issue. And we're also sequestering a lot of carbon these days just in timber that locks it up for years. Last year it's been about 500 tons, so I feel pretty good about that. The other thing I want to mention, just in terms of my own knowledge about this, in case I know most of the folks in this room, but what does a human service guy know about climate change? Anyway, I came to this field, came to WestCAP 30 years ago, having helped to establish and operate as operations director for a dozen years, an environmental center called Wilder Forest, run by the Wilder Foundation in Minnesota. It had a mission around connecting social and environmental issues. So I sort of came hardwired for this thing. And then we were looking at climate change stuff, frankly, 40 years ago. And as these impacts that have particularly affected low-income people have continued to expand over the years here, I don't expect everybody else to have had the background I've had in my field. And most of that time, folks have gone, well, the climate change, that's the enviros issue. We got enough problems in our area dealing with poor people's problems, that kind of thing. But at this point, everybody's been so effective, they kind of get that. So WestCAP, very briefly, our mission is around taking action against poverty, developing social and economic assets. But also half of that mission is working to create a just and sustainable society. And that's what brings me here tonight. And that's what a big part of this work is about. And this is something a little unique to the community action world. We are funded for something beyond just, in our case, like treating the victims of poverty, right? We're also funded and empowered and asked to work on the systems that create poverty and get to the cause of stuff. And increasingly, what we're seeing in the area of climate change and whatnot, certainly one of the main drivers that if you look around the world is incredible. Okay, so this got set up fancy by somebody else, but we do a lot of stuff at WestCAP. Apartment rentals, homeless intervention, Section 8 housing, food programs, weatherization, health education, we provide energy assistance, do a transportation program, and serve about 30,000 folks a year. So we do an awful lot of stuff. We also do things like this. This project is called 1300. It's a housing project that we built a couple years ago in Glenwood City. That's our office, in River Falls. And this particular project won a big national award. It was in the tax credit world. It's 90% of all affordable housing is funded through tax credits. And in that world, we were honored with the top national prize for green and healthy housing a couple years ago. That's brought us a huge amount of attention, frankly. Sitting here with the governor reading this plaque, which kind of like a couple of words on this, dedicating it, the benefits of the project for those people who call this place home, to the community of River Falls, and to the future we all share. The other thing I like about these words is they're the only ones I've written that I'm reasonably sure will survive me because they're cast in aluminum and unlikely to rot unless there's a really aggressive recycling drive. So I think we got something. This particular project generates about 71% of its own energy on site in Kilde. It's got 580 solar panels on the roof and another 36 of these smart flower things in the yard. And it's gotten a tremendous amount of attention all over the place, so that's been fun. Most recently, in a year that I think will probably be known as peak fame for me anyway, also got a cover story on a statewide Cap Times paper, and had quite an impact. We've actually been able to change the rules by which they assign points to get the money for affordable housing, largely based on our experience here. We actually did the thing which moved us in that extremely important arena from talk to action. And that's the difference in terms of mitigating climate change is, if you could do it by talking, we wouldn't have any problems. So much talk. It's the actions and behaviors that tend to be both the issue and anything to address it. Also responsible on the national basis. I served for 20 years on the national board of the Community Action World. Kind of became the environmental point person there, brought together a bunch of national experts, 15 years ago in Annapolis, and some of these folks have gone on to become national and international leaders in this field. And we created a great report facing the new reality, which reads like prophecy today. Got a few copies here if anybody wanted to look at it. But a lot of that stuff that we were talking about 15 years ago is just exactly what's happened, which has also boosted the credibility. And while I'm on that topic, I just ended my service on that board, but have been asked to lead an effort nationally on helping community action agencies in their communities help adapt to climate change. And we're just getting that thing kicked off. Okay. And we dealt with these issues and all that kind of stuff. These are some of the folks. The guy that's right behind my right shoulder there, Richard Heimberg, is the guy who wrote this book, which is one of the best ones ever. The whole set of issues that we're addressing these days. So what are we adapting to and why? Well, currently we're at about 424 parts per million of carbon in the air, which is the highest it's been in hundreds of millions of years. I mean, it's just like completely off the charts. One of the best descriptions I've heard of the impact of climate change came from a writer, John Michael Greer, who talked about the fact that weather over the last 10,000 years, which has been fairly stable, right, since the ice age, kind of ended and things, and it's a dynamic energy system. And the way he puts it, when you either add or subtract energy from a dynamic system, it destabilizes. So that's what we're seeing. We're seeing these, it's just like a plate on a stick. It's fine as long as those things, work about the same. It's got a little variation. If you speed it up, they fly off and crash. If the energy slows down, they start to wobble. And we're seeing wobbles. So we're seeing this range of responses that we've just never seen before. Brief comment on Frank once. If I have time at the end, I'll tell you more about this guy, but he's kind of a spin doctor for usually Republican conservative causes and everything. And up until Bush the second, it was only global warming is what people talked about. And he was saying, well, that sounds a little too threatening. Let's just call it climate change. But change can go either way, and that prevailed, amazingly enough. But what we're really talking about is global warming. It's not just change. The funnier story on Frank Luntz, I'm going to have to wait. We're all seeing it. These are these extremes we're talking about. It's floods, it's blizzards, it's fires. Like we were breathing smoke last summer. Droughts. We see this all the time, and it's increasing in its severity. In the community action world, we kind of grew out also from the civil rights movement, and you all, particularly in this crowd, most of you anyway, would have some memory of Selma, Alabama, and the impact of racism had on this community. This is the impact climate change had on Selma, Alabama last year. Just destroyed the place. An out of season midwinter, 12th of January tornado. Just about destroyed the whole thing. Or hell freezing over is one of the possible things. We've seen a little bit of that. Again, the kinds of things that the impacts that they have are pretty enormous. There's food security, floods, people having to move because they can't live. We're seeing all this kind of stuff. Wildfires. Those of us who were around last summer trying to breathe certainly remember that. And again, these are feedback issues. The estimates from Better Science on what happened there last summer was, that added 2 billion tons of carbon dioxide to just the fires. Right? So we're in this loop system, and it's already happening. The other important thing to note, and I don't have time to get too far in the weeds here, but 90% of the energy warming that's happened on the planet is happening in the oceans. Right? So we don't see it. What we're seeing on the land is from 10%, and the 90% that's going on there, the people who really are the experts on stuff saying, you know, that's the problem that's going to manifest itself in the most extreme way. So it's not like we didn't know it was coming. You know, time report, be worried, be very worried. The date, which you can't see there, is 2006. Right? That's, you know, 15, 16 years ago. And I'm going through, you know, trying to finally deal with the paper mess in my office at work, and I'm digging up all these reports from, you know, late 90s, early, you know, just saying, you know, this is exactly what's going to happen. We're going to have to pay, you know, get serious about this stuff. We have to do something. We didn't do anything. And that has become one of the main foci of my understanding and work in this area is, why don't we do something? We've known about this forever. I want to dig into that a little bit. But a couple of fundamental things. Climate change is caused by the burning of fossil hydrocarbons. Okay. And part of what has obscured things is people are, well, it's agriculture, well, it's transportation, well, it's trucking, well, it's this, well, it's that. All of these are subsets, okay, of extracting and burning fossil hydrocarbons. Okay. That's the problem. And again, one of the things that we have learned is the folks that are in that business knew exactly what was happening. And they use that knowledge to fund and support bad science, conflicting things, sow doubt. And when you have people who don't want to believe it anyway, you just give them a little halfway credible doubt. That's all you have to do. You don't have to prove it. You don't have to do anything. You just have to sow a little doubt. And they've been brilliant at it. But it's also means we really haven't done anything. I mean, you know, our global attempts to address climate change, complete and utter failure. Okay. And this, I just threw in there because I love irony. So this is an ad, okay, from Humble and Esso, who merged later to become Exxon. And they're bragging that, you know, each day Humble supplies enough energy to melt 7 million tons of glacier. Boy, that's really something. And this was in February 2nd, 1962. This figure that cracks me up. And again, I don't want to get too far in the weeds here, but if you look at our oil production, it's peaked last year, warmest year in 125,000 years. We also broke all records in oil production same year. So we're really on top of this. But in reality, most of that oil, the graph on the right, is fracked oil. It's real light stuff, and its supplies are much more limited. Ultimately, point being that the carbon pulse that we are living, you know, with all this consumption and food and travel and all this material and all this kind of stuff, no matter what happens, that's kind of brief. So, you know, when you look at these production numbers, the best way to think about it is you got a finite resource. There's only so much of this stuff out there. It took 15 million years to make it. And we're just making bigger straws to suck it out faster. I mean, it's not like it's generating anything or anything. It's just working all those stuff. So it's really dumb. And just in case anybody's wondering, it's not. So the problem, are they going to do something about it? Any questions? And the real thing is, no, it's not that they won't, it's they didn't. Okay. So if we look here, this little map, the jagged line is CO2 in the atmosphere, which is the primary driver of climate change. So in 1997, climate change was settled science. It was so settled that 191 nations agreed in a treaty bound by law to address climate change. Very important to note that the United States didn't sign that treaty, okay? But in any event, you know, it was that convincing. They knew, you know, 30 years. Since then, as the caption notes, we've put more CO2 in the atmosphere since that climate change conference in Kyoto than in all of human history up to that time. Does that sound like success to you? A little further down the line, on the accelerated curve, we get to the Paris Accords, and no developed country has hit the targets, and again, that's where we are. If a person weren't too liable to be trapped around the problem with causation and correlation, it could almost look on this chart like the cause of climate change are climate conferences. Every time you have one and it goes up, the curve accelerates just a little bit. But that, that's a grim reality for sure. What it really looks like, and this is another, just kind of massive issue. The problem with energy, which is where all this goes, is that we are addicted. We can't get enough of it. And what's happened with all these great things, anytime if you look on the upper right-hand side, you're adding renewables and biofuel and solar and all that kind of stuff, but it just adds to the amount of energy. It doesn't replace anything. And so, and there's just no upper limit to how much energy we could consume if it was available to us. We're kind of hardwired for that. We evolved for a different world than one we happen to be living in. Well, what does it look like? So this is the only slide. It's a new one I just added with a bunch of text, but it just, you can't make this stuff up. So, and I got this in real time because I pay attention to these things all the time. Just ask my daughters. So on the day that was the hottest day, January 7th, right? Hottest day in 125,000 years, shattered all previous records. There was also a press release from the International Trade Association for Commercial Airplanes, saying that day there were more airplanes in the air than at any day ever in history. Unbelievable. Okay? Same dang day. And, meantime, people, you remember last summer, all over the South, people were dying of heating rush and everything else. So, COP27, the opening, Secretary Gutierrez on the board of climate health, put us on the accelerator. A year later, all numbers gone up. We're back in another oil country, and there are 2,400 oil lobbyists present at that event. The guy organizing it was also hoping to do some oil deals, while it was there. Some good things came out of that conference, actually, around food systems and some actual support for impact and all that kind of stuff. But in terms of, is this going to prevent catastrophic climate change or have an impact on all the evidence is no. There's no evidence that it would, that it ever has, or that it ever will. Which is all leading up to the point. I love this. This particular thing is actually a little sculpture. It's an art installation. It's about this big that moves around Europe, and he sets it in a puddle and regulates it. All this is so here's another major problem, and if there are a few themes in my talk. One of them is that the problem on addressing climate change is one of insufficiency, right? It's not like what we're doing is bad or negative. It just isn't sufficient to, address the problem. I imagine, and people, so the country, well, we had all these solar panels, or we did all this kind of stuff, or we were growing up with it. And to me, I imagine if you're a school bus driver and you're screaming down the road and you got a bus full of kids and there's signs up, road closed ahead, stop and everything, and you slow that bus down from 65 to 55, and you go over the bridges out and kill a bunch of children and everything, your defense is, well, it could have been worse, I slowed to 55. How lame is that? But that's exactly the kind of mentality, that we often run into on this kind of stuff. Well, look at all the good we're doing. Well, it's just nowhere near enough, in order to have the kind of impact you want. Quiz time. 62%, 42%, 25%. Anybody know what those percentages represent? Time's up. Okay. 62% of the first class passengers survived the Titanic. 42% of the second class passengers survived the Titanic. 25% of the third class passengers survived the Titanic. That pattern just about locked it in for all time. It's the same story we run into everywhere. In New Orleans, in Puerto Rico, in Bangladesh, it doesn't matter. You know, the impact and, you know, for these kind of disasters disproportionately impacts poor people. It always does. You know? It's quite astonishing. Okay, so what about those 23 states that have roadmap to net zero by 2050? I get in a little hot water here because I know these folks and I've actually, my fingerprints are on this plan in a very faint way here and there. I can identify them. But again, because in this case, I'll come back to that. Essentially, like the Wisconsin plan, okay, the Wisconsin plan is to be net zero by 2050. It's going to grow the economy by 3% a year. It's going to increase our energy consumption by 25%. It's going to increase our electrical consumption by 28%. It's going to increase the amount of wind capacity we use by, I think, 87%. And there's no way that that can happen here, so any excess we're just going to get from another state, apparently, that doesn't need it, like Illinois. They don't have any big cities. I mean, it's, and on the other side, you know, this is the state's plan. So I happen to know some people in the utility industry, and I was talking to the general manager of the utility, very well, and said, have you seen that Wisconsin plan to net zero energy? What do you think of that? And the guy burst out laughing. I mean, before he had a chance to think, before, you know, before it was, he just laughed. He said, yeah, that's. I mean, so again, kind of want folks to be doing these kind of things, but at the same time, if you're relying on that, those things can't happen. There just isn't enough time. There's enough material. On the planet. It just doesn't exist. But it's in the hands of politicians. So imagine a politician, say something you like, okay? But I'll do a fake, you know, candidate Jones, right? Running for president of the United States in this environment. Like we understand this environment. Gets up there and says, you know, folks, it's time we got serious about climate change. And vote for me, and we're going to tackle this problem and preserve this great country for the future and your children. Yes, it's going to reduce the economy by 50 to 60%. Nobody's going to be able to fly anymore. Unemployment's going to be running around that level. You won't have very much money. You're going to have to be scratching in your backyard for food, but you know, we're going to get this thing done. What chance do you think that person would have of becoming elected? Okay. We have put the decisions and the management of this system in the hands of an economic and political structure that is incapable of doing it. It's not, you know, and I used to be mad at these people. I'm not anymore. It's like being mad at a turtle for not being able to fly. You know, you can be mad at them if you want, but it isn't going to help anything. That system can't do it, right? Which is why I'm here tonight talking with you about what we have to do to adapt to the fact that it ain't happening. The structures aren't going to make it happen, period. So, it gets to the more optimistic part. Well, this is where it gets a little problematic. Unfortunately, you know, so far at least, we as a species and the way we behave and what we value and what we really do comes out of a evolutionary legacy that is a mismatch for our current situation. And we have to, that's part of it. And then the other part of it is the way the dominant culture has worked. There are cultures around who have managed to live in their environment without screwing it up for many thousands of years, but they are not running the show. Okay. So, this is one of the important slides. Okay. I'd like to make a couple. Climate change is not caused by what we believe, we care about, hope for, we desire, who or what we worship, who we love, who we hate. None of those things cause climate change. Climate change is caused by what we do. Right? It's the physical manifestation of our beliefs. And one of the things that I've run into, and it just, and it just illustrates this point, I'll just share a little factoid. The single large demographic that does the most to cause climate change are people who believe climate change is the biggest problem facing the world today. Who are they? College educated, they're affluent, they travel, they live in large houses, they trade their cars up every couple of years, they fly around, they go on cruises and feel good if that cruise recycles the beer cans.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the group. It's us. Who actually, our behaviors are the primary drivers of this thing, even though our beliefs, very sincere. There's nothing hypocritical about it. It's just that we're wired differently in terms of what actually causes our behavior. So I spent a fair amount of time digging into that, and I won't go too nuts on it tonight. But we're basically primates, okay? And have always been primates. We evolved as primates. And what determines our actual behavior is much more around how our perceived tribe or community behaves. We behave like other people in our group, right? In case you don't believe that. It's just, you just kind of see it everywhere. So if you happen to be in a, professional demographic of, you're going to live in this kind of house, more or less, you're likely to have a second home up north or whatnot, and maybe, I mean, it's just because that's who you are, and that's kind of how we establish our identity and what we do. The other thing that's, I love this cartoon. It came out in the Christian Science Monitor. But and this has been very thoroughly studied at this point. 80% of the population has evolved to have an optimism bias. An optimism bias says you believe things are going to turn out better than all the evidence suggests they will. That's what an optimism bias is. It's a delusion. And we think optimism is good. We got to be optimistic. Optimism is great. Now, optimism is one of our biggest problems because we don't act on the information we got because we have this hardwired, evolutionary, determined kind of thing. I don't want to get myself in too much trouble here, but it kind of makes sense. If you're hanging out with somebody and they're fun and they have a positive view of the future and all that kind of stuff, more likely for those folks to be the kind of people you'd like to have a baby with. Okay?
This room does contain some counteracting evidence.
Perhaps. But for the most part, I mean, University College in London did the first huge study on this, and there's a lot of other support. But basically, that bias is kind of hardwired. And then you've got 5-6% that are pessimists, and that's really a bad thing. And then there are 9 of us realists in the middle. I'm actually having optimism bias, I know I do. But make every effort at least to be realistic. What is really the truth? And I put this out to you too, and comment or anybody else. Anything you're hearing tonight is wrong. I think think this is just not true, let me know, because if my premise is wrong and your evidence is good, I'll change it. I'm only interested in what the actual facts are. So, you know, the bigger problem, this amazing book, Jonathan Haidt's The Righteous Mind, he's a social psychologist, and basically, you know, talking about what the function of the conscious mind and the unconscious mind, right, the subconscious mind. And he basically says, you know, the subconscious mind is like the elephant, the conscious mind is like the rider, and it's the rider's job to serve the elephant. So when you hear these amazing rationalizations for all this wacky stuff, that's the mind, or anything else that's being thought quite reasonable, supporting the interests of subconscious, which are different. We'll get into that a little bit. We tend to think it's our thinking that drives our behavior. The new slide from Nate Hagen. It's actually pretty much the opposite. You know, our basic system, the enteric, is the system that, you know, governs the body itself. The reptilian is a response to what's around you, avoiding dangers, you know, going after, you know, positive things. The limbic system is our feelings of satisfaction, you know, what makes us feel good, what doesn't make us feel good. And cognition is, you know, in terms of behavioral drivers. These are the kind of interests of the subconscious mind. It wants to feel good, it wants to have status, it wants to eat, it wants to kill the enemy, raise the enemy. And there's a little bit left over for other things. So, also an example of this thing. This came out in 2013 when, you know, first time carbon passed 400. And it's, you know, where were you when carbon levels passed? Well, I was on my 75-minute commute to work. Other guys, I love this. I was blowing flower petals with my leaf blaster 5000. Or I was off to enjoy nature with my RV with the boat and, you know. The SS Turtle Wagger. And this actually, but this is the way we live. You know? And if you can afford it, and that kind of stuff, I mean, it's very common. Not everybody. One of the advantages about being a human is that we don't all respond exactly the same way to the same things. Okay, that's a large. Going to get into a few issues. Again, one of the issues is the extent to which we are, a lot of the things that drive our energy systems, everything drives the energy system, is kind of market driven. So I want to buy a Prius because, or a Leaf, to do my thing for the environment. That's a good thing, believe me. However, the impact that has on this is that it means the gas that you're not burning is available at a slightly lower price for someone who really wants to be able to afford that F-150 and a goblet of it. We use it all. That's the point. Bitcoin, for example, hallucinated wealth, if ever there was any, uses about 10% of all the photovoltaic in the entire world, just processing, just mining for Bitcoin. Okay, 10%. This is an example of something I changed. I had originally come across a quote that was more like 70, 80%, and was corrected and found out that that study had been discounted. I immediately changed the presentation. Try to tell the truth. I'm not trying to just look for stuff that supports it. This one, very briefly, I love this problem in a sense, but Finland, okay? No, Sweden. This is Sweden. Decided, quite a few years back that they were going to take on, climate change, be responsible, and all that kind of stuff, and they were going to incentivize people to do deep retrofits on their house to get to near net zero. And the deal was the government would pay for the retrofits, but allow the residents to keep the savings from their energy bills, right? And they racked that all up and stuff. And then at the end of 5 years, they did a huge study. What they found is that by far and away, the thing most families did, which was the most popular, vacation around here, is they took cruises with the money they saved. And if they added it all up, it actually ended up being more carbon than if they hadn't done anything, right? So that's the kind of thing that we're up against when it comes to dealing with the problem. This one I love, of course. We just go absolutely bananas. Oh my God, they're burning the Brazilian rainforest, which is horrific, but this is coming from a country that has destroyed 98% of all of our old growth forests. I've traveled some around the world, and they know this. They know this. We, the greatest consumers of all this stuff, the prime drivers of climate change, lecturing these other countries about being better environmentalists, doesn't go over very well. Okay. Well, technology saves us from catastrophe. So be a little bit more creative on other ways to say no. This is another one of probably the most important slides in the whole deck. I could spend a whole talk on this particular one, but again, remember before we were looking at how when you add a new energy source, it doesn't really cut down on an old energy source, it just adds, it just gives more energy. Nate Higgins and some of his folks again mapped that energy thing on GDP, right? Correlation is 99%. It's not causation, but correlation can at least tell you where to look sometimes. And the relationship between energy consumption and GDP is almost exactly right. So if we're going to get energy consumption down to where we need it to be to survive the planet, it's going to dramatically shrink the economy. And you won't find an established plan anywhere that says, adopt this plan and we'll take the economy down, right? I mean, it's just like, no, you got to have it all or it's not a plan. And that's why none of this stuff works. The amount of energy we use, if we're looking at, slave, not paid, every single man, woman, and child in America is supported by 147 people who are 24/7. If you call them employees or whatever, 500. That's how much energy underpin our lifestyle. I always love this cartoon. Make sure poor people don't live just like we don't, right? Blaming these third world countries for various kind of things. And yes, we have met the enemy eating his dust in this case. So looking forward, we hear a lot about AI these days and motivation. Well, just to give you a sense of what that means. Currently, oil's about $80 a barrel. It's up to 120 for a while. It's still about 80 now, so I'm using this figure. So the amount of energy it takes in a barrel of oil is about 1,700 kilowatts of energy, which equates to about 25,000 hours of human labor. That's how much it takes to do what we do. And if you are valuing that time at $20 an hour, which is really pretty low, that's $500,000 worth of labor in a barrel of oil. If you use oil to use it instead of that human labor, it costs that company 1/3 of a cent an hour. No HR department, no vacation, no health insurance, no schedules, no overtime, 24/7. The pressure for any company to move in that direction all the time is massive. Anytime you see work, doesn't matter what it is, it's in. There's some studies out on the impact of what is already happening in AI, just on energy consumption. It takes massive amounts of energy to do that kind of stuff. Right now, it's amounting to about 30% of global warming is from computer work, the whole system. But the temptation in this system, that's the temptation is driving it. So this is actually a few years ago. There were plans to automate 75 million jobs by 2030. It's way bigger than that. We use that by using more time. Awesome. There is no other way. You can't do work without internet. It doesn't happen. Work is. Forget about fusion. Yikes. Okay. What do we do now? Okay. Take a deep breath. All right. You know, no point in necessarily fretting about all of that. If you're doing something, there is to do. Study up on it. Some of these folks have been authors of some of the great stuff. Again, this book, Power by Richard Heinberg, phenomenally bright guy. Known him for a long time. And, you know, at this point, you know, just one of the most highly regarded books out there. The book reads like, you know, you're a religious person, it's like the New Testament. It's like, okay, you know, we're going to have a meeting and we're going to study 3 lines of, you know, power of every guy. It's that profound a book. This is amazing. But Nate Hagen was also part of that group who currently has got about 80,000 people tuning into his work on the great civilization worldwide. And so that's all cool. So there's a book. They've also done a very good book on building community resilience, which is a big part of what I'd be advocating for. And then Richard and another guy at the Post Carbon Institute, Bashir Miller, put together this 50-pager. You get it for $10. You get it free online if you want. Post Carbon Institute. The best short summary on the future that's actually coming that I've ever seen. This is the only piece of literature that I am insisting my senior managers read, study, and get to know. It does a better job of laying out that. So, and then Nate Hagen's, you know, just great simplification, just Google that, amazing stuff. So I'm going to scream through the rest of these so I can stop and take a few questions, but, you know, the future that's actually coming, please tell you that this isn't it. These guys will be out of gas by 2 in the afternoon, and there'll be very much silence in the desert. Whether or not big cities will be sustainable depends on their access to food and other resources that don't have to come from around the world. The techno future ain't happening, there ain't none of the stuff. Some sort of severe economic contraction or collapse is near certain. You don't want to be banking on this current system being there forever. You know, 3 things that can happen while it's working and stuff. Yeah, we're gonna just talk about that a little bit. Grant delivery differently, more, you know, this kind of an environment. I love this picture. This is a little village in England. You don't see any sign of a car or fire or any of that kind of stuff. Does that look like Hellview? Does not look like Hellview? There's all kinds of, you know, wonderful things available to us if we can shed the addiction of this thing that's killing. Okay. Reducing consumption of non-renewable resources, building local economies, and about. So I just have a lot of examples: less lawn, more garden. You can read these big box. And less Disney World, more our own world. Less plane, more train. Less castle, more cozy. There's the house again. Less Armada, more Leaf. Oh, there you go. But it also is important, you know, that if you go to the Nissan website and you're looking at the Leaf, my God, it's the most environmentally friendly company. It's good rivers, it's all kinds of other stuff. Flip the page, they also make the Armada, which is a complete obscenity for, you know, material and energy and stuff. Okay, so you get the idea. This is somebody, I used to know this person. Oh, hi. He's still here and still with me, but I love this photograph. FaceTime. And 1 million people have now seen this.
That's really cute.
Less cellophane and more celebrate. We're in this together. It looks pretty nice. How do we get there? start now
You're
figuring out
skipping all
ways.
the happy bits,
I'm
Dad.
not skipping the happy bits. Take some community action, facilitate a climate change adaptation process, get people together who understand this stuff and start doing things. One of the things we learned at the 1300 project is there's tremendous power in actually going from words to action. Just completely, changed our entire response out there. This is actually a house that we did in Plowing. Net zero house, duplex, low income people over there, love it. These are all different technologies that harness available non-fossil energy sources. Okay, these are all things WestCAP. We built a net zero house about 3 blocks from here, still cranking away, and folks been over there, and works great. Various other kind of projects, community solar, still a pretty good idea, although you have to understand that there are not enough of those materials on the planet to support the lifestyle right now. So it can't just be that, it has to be that coupled with living within the boundaries of that production, okay? That's what's hard for us to get. Support local food systems. I don't think anybody here recognizes this. Skip over this. And finally, we need old new skills and new knowledge for a real new age. Limited resources, but unlimited potential for happiness and meaningful life. I told you we'd get through 102 slides, we just did. Yeah. So, thank you. I appreciate the applause. I call it success if you don't run. Anybody have any questions? And just as a teaser, I do have a thing I want to show you at the end that's sort of a surprise. So keep that in mind. I'm sorry, there's no way I could possibly answer that question. What do you got?
What kind of immediate life changes have you seen be very accessible for people trying to start mediating their own?
Well, I think a great place to start is food. That's food and shelter. You just start at the basics. And we live in a part of the world that, fortunately, if you have to pick a place from all the science and stuff, that's most survivable, we're living it. This is also going to be problematic when other folks live in places that don't support anymore. That's an issue. But, the capacity we have for doing many things, I know many people in this room have done. We can grow food, and we can create relatively modest shelters. We can heat these shelters with non-fossil energy like we do in our houses, mostly firewood and that kind of stuff. We take care of the land around us, and if you live in town or don't, in a place where you can't do that, support the places that do. Get your photos from CSA. Yeah.
It's so easy.
Right. I mean, to me, I have a picture, right? So we don't have a clothes dryer. And we had one for a while, it busted, and we knocked it apart and threw it in the dryer. And we never missed it. So we used one of those old wooden racks. In the wintertime, right? It not only dries your clothes right away in the house, it also adds some humidity, right? I have a picture of our dryer on high, which is pushed a little closer to the wood range. Okay. I mean, in the summertime, hanging outside, how hard is that?
Solar dryer.
Yeah, it's just all right. And, and again, that's not a bad experience. Are you better off listening to that thing clunk away and running up your electric bill and polluting? And just, then you throw some chemicals in there to make it smell like it was hung outside. These are some of the dumbest things I've ever heard in my life.
Peter,
Yeah.
one of the issues that we keep knocking against, and you came right up to the edge of it a few times, I'm thinking this is a socialist, but we're living in a capitalist system that demands good. You talk about cutting down what it would take and relationship to the GNP and all that.
Right.
We can't expect, Marx talked about growth that was it's metastasized. That's what is required. You know, we're up against that system that demands it needs to have it to exist, and we're all saying, wait. And I find that's a crucial point in all of this.
Oh, absolutely, and I've always made the same point, you know, the system that we have right now is literally incapable of addressing this problem. Literally incapable. So I don't knock my head against it much anymore, you know. The kind of systems, you know, what I think are the best kind of strategies, frankly, are the end run. You know, that thing's gonna commit suicide anyway,
Right.
you know, and start building the structures and relationships, support, you know, we have a nice network of local food producers, a nice network of local artists, local healers, all kinds of stuff, you know, and that's, put your energy in there, and this crazy thing is gonna keep going until it's can't hold it. And then hopefully what we have left with will be the seeds of a new understanding of how we live on the planet. And I don't really don't think there's any much further that, but it's also kind of fun to think about. You know, building that little
We just spent a month in Colorado with our son, and he has one car, and he took it to work, so that left Jim and I at our own devices, and we walked the neighborhood a lot, which was wonderful, but we also learned to ride the bus. And the bus was so much fun. The people were incredibly respectful of the bus driver, all the bus drivers, and, you know, the buses were on time. You could track them with your cell phone. We could go anywhere. It's like, why would we want a car? And what, you know, why can't that happen here? And they try to have good bus service, but nobody uses it.
Oh, not true, they just gave their annual report. They just gave their annual report that Dunn County Transit is, the ridership is the highest it's been.
Well, we, you know, instead of thinking cars, we need to be thinking more riding the bus. It's just like,
And they've added a route for the students so that they can get more economically, not to drive. So they've adapted. Yeah.
Yeah, those are good things, and, you know, that's the end run kind of thing, and
in making it socially acceptable,
Right.
making it fun, making it, you know, easy.
no, I think that's, yeah, it's wonderful, those are all right. And the other thing, you know, it's interesting, in Northern Europe, you know, pre the most recent year, because everything very messed up with the Ukraine war and energy systems over there. But for the most part, those folks live at very comfortable lifestyle level and use about half the energy that we do. You know, and if you look at what they drive and what we drive, you know, I mean, I work in an agency that prides itself on doing energy conservation work and stuff, and it just totally cracks me up when I roll up in the morning. Every vehicle is a massive, you know, SUV, crew cab pickup, you know. We show up for Morris dancing practice at the boy school, and there's something there before. Every vehicle in the lot, just about crew cab pickup, is absolutely massive. You know, well, that's what our other monkeys do. And that's the drive we're in, motivation to behave that way. So we also have to kind of know what we're up against. A big part of what we're up against is us.
And on the topic of both clotheslines and buses, something that that I'm trying to come to terms with is the fact that what energy consumption gets us a lot of the time is time. I lived for 3 years in the Twin Cities without a car, and for 1 year in the Twin Cities with a car. That was then stolen, and then the next one broke down, and there was a lot of I did a lot of transit by public transit, and yes, I could get to the places I needed to go, but it took a lot of time. And yes, I really enjoy hanging out laundry, and I prefer that to trying to like haul things into the basement dryer that doesn't work in my apartment complex. But it takes more time, and that commodity is something that is kind of monopolized as you were talking about, as we're heading towards this kind of, you know, like stage capitalist, all that jazz, is that our time is what we are selling in exchange for these conveniences. And when we don't have a baseline of resources, we can't really afford to give up our time.
One of the things that I pay a lot of attention to these days is time is just sort of a constant. So, and I'm not coming necessarily around exactly what you're saying, but also has a lot to do with what are you doing with your time? And if it's more important than trying to do things to conserve the planet, I'd like to hear about it because I should be doing it too. And a lot of what I see is time stealers that are hanging around waiting for folks waiting to demand that time, on the other side. So it's a complex. It's a good point. Yeah.
One of the things I was thinking when I first saw that program thing, we've been using those for a long time. When I was working, when I was not working, but it does take one. It's more intentional and deliberate. So we live in an apartment complex of retired people. Off of our driveway, there are 8 apartment buildings. At the end of the clothes yard, first thing I saw, the clothesline.
Yeah.
There are, out of those 8 apartments, these are people who are retired now. They go to work, right? 3 of us. One is very, very part-time. She might hang a blanket up once or twice a year. There are really only 2 of us who use the clothing. These are people like us that have more time and could do this intentional thing. But my guess is that they've gotten out of the habit of it. They've gotten into the habit, culturally, habitually, to throw that thing in that box that drives home and they do my work. But my neighbors, most of those people in their driveway don't go to work. So there are the time stealers that have changed their habits and now they don't even look at that thing as an option. So me and this other woman go out there and that took 2. We go out there with our baskets and go, well, maybe everybody else will start doing this.
Yeah.
It gets to be a habitually, you choose.
Yeah. And I'm not sure if I'm right on this, but I think that what you were referring to with the time stealers is things like, the internet and that sort of thing that a lot of people sink a lot of time into. And I think that that's really tied up with the same thing, because when you are on the internet, you are essentially a product that is, being sold to ad companies. And like when you are consuming things for free, you're the product. So like when I say that time is something that is at cost, it's not even that like more what I'm saying is that like all of our time is spent contributing to that in some way, whether it is working or whether it is like on the like I'm losing my plot here, but more basically just that it's all part of the same thing, even if it's not an exchange of funds. Y'all know this. I don't need to say this.
No, that's a good point, though. So we've gone slightly over our time. I don't want to hold folks beyond their time here, but I do have about a 2-minute video that comes as a treat, and it illustrates some of what we're saying in a most interesting way. Now, this is where, as soon as I get to the part where I'm trying to do anything technical,
I don't like to fill on.
oh, that's a good point.
It'll be okay.
gonna need to share again.
Power of community. Share sound. Share sound. Oh, okay.
So I need much more sound.
Also, sound sharing is not on.
Oh, it's bouncing on.
There you go. Break it up. I need more sound.
You're in an unstable condition. Patient. Experience rise, temperature fluctuating. Thank you. What's happening?
I think you have
You're
to
in an
exit
unstable
sharing and
condition.
reshare.
It doesn't look good. Oh my god, I'm gonna die, haven't I? No, there is a cure. You'll never get back to where you were.
Stop this.
You have about time left. But we need to act now. Yeah?
This is why I didn't do this during the presentation, because this is the way it always goes with me.
Should we get started then, or? Yes. Yeah, we need to act immediately. Okay, great, yeah.
Okay, so can you make the sound louder now, you think? It isn't louder.
As the patient. There you go. Sea levels rising, temperature fluctuating. The situation's critical, doctor. He's waking up. What's happening? You're in an unstable condition. It doesn't look good. Oh my god, I'm gonna die, am I? No, there is a cure. You'll never get back to where you were, but you'll have a lot of time left. But we need to act now. Alright. Let's just. Okay. Yeah? So, should we get started then, or? Yes. Yeah, we need to act immediately. Okay, great, yeah. Yeah. I won't let you down. Okay. Doctor, he's burning up. I haven't seen temperatures like this before. No, you're not. Not on my watch. Wait, there's something. Okay, we're gonna do something, right? But before we do it, I need to let you know that this could be incredibly painful. Okay, for us. For you. It's not painful and really inconvenient. What? Yes. Make something happen. Okay, this is what we need to do. We need to sedate the patient and bring him to the operating theater. Yes, doctor. Then as I wash up and put on my gown, you sterilize the area and prepare the instruments. Yes, doctor. Then when everything's ready, I'll make my way down to the theater and I'll ask you for a scalpel. You'll reach over to the metal tray. What is that talking about? We need to be 100% sure before we act. Doctor, the analysis has just come back from the lab. Whoa. This is definitive. It tells us exactly what we need to do. Okay, let's not waste any more time. Oh, doctor, wait. What is it? There's this conflicting evidence. This changes everything. No. You're just not going to do anything, are you? We're doing everything we can. It doesn't seem like that. Doctor, Mars is here for their checkup. Okay. Very sorry, Eric. We're going to have to reschedule. What? What's wrong with Mars? Oh, nothing. It's just exploratory. Hello, we are full arms.
Okay. Anyway, sort of the story, there's all this fervent talk and all this other stuff. When it comes to actually doing things, it ain't happening. So it kind of falls on people who understand that to take some action in their area where they can do something and get ready, because just not doing anything is going to work very well. Okay. So thank you all for coming. Appreciate the engagement, and sure, ask questions or anything. Just more than happy.
He's great on vacation.
Well, my Jim Laskin from Glenwood City gave me the nickname Uncle Bummer. I wear with great pride. I keep that.
And
I share it. Thank you.
I sure do.
And it looks like we have Kurt McNamara online, and so he's going to speak on February 22nd about fixing the systems. So we're going to go larger on the 22nd.
Awesome.
And then we have water coming up and recycling in April, so, and car-free living in March. So keep us
Great.
watch on all the events.
Great. Just really
January.
record on the power free living?
Yep,
Okay.
car-free living on March 14th after the
Okay.
Red Cedar
22nd.
watershed.
What if Andrew French, Andrew French, I saw his name on there.
Drew is, he's in our Sangha.
Right.
He's a farmer, right?
I don't know what he does.
Oh,
Oh,
Well,
Honest,
he drives amps for Amazon. That's his.
oh, he drives, okay. So thank you for coming online as well.
So when is Creek Community? 22nd of what month?
February.
Okay.
February 22nd. And so February 1st, we'll have about the lakes. February 22nd is sustainability and systems. The February 29th is Dunn County water results. So we'll find out what the well testing was all about. And then March 14th is car-free living, and April 18th is can I recycle this? So bring all those things. We want to know if we can actually recycle or not. And Megan Hines will tell us.
Great.
All right.
Well, thanks for hosting this also,
Thank
Ann. That's
you, Peter.
really important.